The gala on the 47th floor of Voss Industries didn't smell like champagne or success. It smelled like blood and quiet treason. I've spent 247 years pretending to be 35, stifling my predatory instincts beneath charcoal wool suits and practiced smiles. I'm supposed to be the most dangerous monster in the room, but tonight my empire wasn't threatened by a corporate war. It was threatened by a temp waitress. A girl smelling of rust and rain who slipped into my party wearing second-hand shoes and carrying an object in her pocket that defied the laws of death. An iron ring I last saw on my wife's cold finger as they buried her nearly 2 centuries ago. The penthouse smelled like money and nothing else. No coffee, no perfume, no trace of human warmth. Just the antiseptic bite of marble cleaner and the recycled chill of air conditioning set to Arctic. Kaia stood in the entrance hall, her canvas sneakers silent against floors so polished they reflected the city lights 60 stories below. She pressed her palm against the strap of her supply bag, feeling the familiar weight of microfiber cloths and glass cleaner, and tried to steady the flutter in her chest. The agency had been clear. Night shift only. No questions. Triple the standard rate. She'd signed the papers without reading past the dollar amount. Student loans didn't care about red flags. The city sprawled beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows, like a circuit board, all amber veins and white nodes pulsing with life she couldn't hear. Up here, silence had texture. It pressed against her eardrums, thick and watchful. She moved through the living room, her reflection ghosting across black lacquered surfaces. Leather furniture sat arranged in perfect right angles, untouched. A glass coffee table held nothing but its own gleaming emptiness. Even the art on the walls felt cold, abstract slashes of silver and grey that could have been anything or nothing. She ran her finger along the back of a chair. Not a speck of dust. Someone had cleaned this place recently, thoroughly. So why was she here? The intercom crackled, and Kaia's hand jerked back. "Miss Farrow." The voice was male, clipped, British. "Mr. Graves speaking. I trust you've arrived." She scanned the ceiling until she found the camera, a black dome embedded in the crown molding. "Yes, I'm here." "Excellent. Please proceed to the kitchen. You'll find your instructions on the counter." The intercom died with a soft click. Kaia wound through the penthouse, past a dining room with a table that could seat 12, but held only a single orchid in a crystal vase. The kitchen gleamed like an operating theatre, all stainless steel and white quartz. An envelope sat centered on the island, her name written in fountain pen across the front. She broke the seal. The letter inside was typed, single-spaced, and longer than any cleaning checklist she'd ever seen. Her eyes caught on phrases as she skimmed. "Discretion is paramount. Deviation from protocol will result in immediate termination. Under no circumstances are you to enter the West Wing." The West Wing. She glanced toward the hallway that branched off the main living space, where the lights dimmed to a soft glow. A corridor that seemed to stretch into shadow. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, asterisk. "Please sign the attached document before beginning your duties." The attachment loaded. Non-disclosure agreement. 6 pages of legal density that boiled down to one message: see nothing, say nothing, or lose everything. Kaia's thumb hovered over the screen. Through the window, rain had started to fall, streaking the glass with silver threads. The city blurred behind the downpour, and for a moment she felt the weight of the height, the terrible distance between this sterile palace and the ground. She signed with her fingertip and hit send. The reply came instantly. Asterisk, "Welcome to the St. Clair residence. Your discretion is appreciated." St. Clair. The name tugged at something in her memory. A headline half glimpsed, a Forbes cover in a waiting room. Reclusive tech billionaire. Venture capital. The kind of wealth that didn't just open doors, it made them disappear. She folded the instructions and tucked them in her back pocket, then pulled out her supplies. The list was specific. Dust all surfaces in the main living areas, sanitize the kitchen, replace the linens in the master bedroom, water the plants in the solarium. Standard work, except for the addendum at the bottom, underlined twice, asterisk. Do not respond to any sounds from the West Wing. Do not investigate. Do not engage. Kaia's skin prickled. She started with the living room, working methodically, letting the familiar rhythm of cleaning settle her nerves. Spray, wipe, move. The microfiber cloth whispered against glass. Her reflection followed her from surface to surface, a dark-haired ghost in jeans and a faded nursing school t-shirt. She'd pulled her hair back in a bun, but strands had already escaped, curling against her neck in the aggressive AC. By the time she reached the solarium, her shoulders had started to relax. The room was different from the rest of the penthouse, warmer somehow despite the same cold glass walls. Plants crowded every surface, ferns spilling from hanging baskets, succulents arranged in geometric patterns, a fiddle-leaf fig tree stretching toward the ceiling. She filled her watering can from the utility sink and moved between the pots, checking soil with her fingertips. That's when she heard it. A sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the white noise of rain. A hitch. A sob. The unmistakable catch of a child crying. Kaia froze, water dripping from the can's spout onto her shoe. The sound came again, muffled but distinct, carried through the ventilation system. Not just crying, weeping. The kind of tears that came from somewhere deep and hopeless. She set down the watering can, her hands suddenly unsteady. The West Wing. The sound was coming from the West Wing. Asterisk, do not respond to any sounds. But that was a child, a little kid, alone and sobbing in the dark. Kaia moved before she could talk herself out of it, following the sound through the main hall. The corridor to the West Wing stretched ahead, carpeted in charcoal grey, lit by sconces that cast more shadow than light. Family photos lined the walls, but as she passed them, she realized they were all the same. A little girl with pale blonde hair and enormous eyes, always alone, never smiling. School portraits, candids that felt staged. In every image, the child looked directly at the camera with an expression that made Kaia's throat tighten. The crying grew louder. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. Warm light spilled through the crack, golden against the cold blue of the corridor. The sound came from inside, raw and broken. Kaia's hand reached for the handle. The lights in the hallway flickered once, then died completely, plunging her into darkness, so absolute she couldn't see her own fingers. The crying stopped. In the sudden silence, she heard something else, footsteps, deliberate and slow, coming from somewhere behind her, and a voice, low and cold as winter stone. You were warned. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the blackness with a weight that pressed against her sternum. Kaia's hand froze on the door handle, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and throat. The word barely formed. Her pulse hammered in her ears, drowning out rational thought. Behind her, those footsteps continued their measured approach. Not hurried, not aggressive, just inevitable, like the tide coming in. The kind of walk that said the walker knew she had nowhere to go. But inside the room she heard it, a small hitching breath, the aftermath of crying. A child trying to be quiet, trying to be good, even while terrified. Kaia's fingers tightened on the handle. She shoved the door open and stumbled inside, slamming it behind her. Her back pressed against the wood, hands splayed flat against the surface. The lock was one of those old-fashioned mechanisms, brass and heavy. She twisted it, and the bolt slid home with a sound like a gunshot. The room blazed with light after the corridor's darkness. She blinked hard, eyes adjusting, taking in details in fragmented bursts. A four-poster bed draped in white gauze, walls painted the softest lavender, shelves lined with books and stuffed animals arranged with military precision. A child's room, but sterile somehow. Beautiful and unlived in, like a museum display of what childhood should look like. And in the corner, wedged between the bed and the wall, a little girl stared at her with eyes the color of storm clouds. The child from the photographs. Pale blonde hair falling in tangles around a face too thin, too serious. She wore pajamas printed with stars and moons, and her bare feet were pulled up tight against her chest. Tear tracks glistened on her cheeks, but she'd gone completely still, watching Kaia with an expression caught between hope and terror. "Hey," Kaia whispered, her voice rough. She stayed by the door, making herself small, non-threatening. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl's eyes darted to the door, then back to Kaia. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Outside, those footsteps had stopped. The silence felt worse somehow. Kaia could feel a tension on the other side of the door, could sense someone standing there, listening, deciding. She slid down to sit on the floor, putting herself at the child's level. Her hands shook, so she pressed them flat against her thighs. The carpet was plush under her palms, thick enough to sink into. Everything in this room was expensive, carefully chosen, meticulously maintained. Everything except the little girl herself, who looked like she hadn't been held in years. "My name's Kaia," she said softly. "What's yours?" The girl's throat worked. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible, scraped raw from crying. "Elodie, Elodie." Kaia let the name settle between them. "That's a beautiful name." A pause, then so quietly Kaia almost missed it. "You're not supposed to be here." "I know." Kaia's chest ached. "I heard you crying. I couldn't just—" She stopped, searching for the right words. "I couldn't leave you alone." Elodie's eyes widened, as if this concept was foreign, incomprehensible. Her fingers twisted in the fabric of her pajama top, worrying at a loose thread. "Papa says no one comes in here. Ever, not even the day maids. Just me and sometimes Mr. Graves when Papa's away." "Papa." The word landed like a stone in Kaia's stomach. Varic St. The man whose footsteps had followed her down that hallway, the man who was probably still standing outside this door right now. "Are you scared of your papa?" Kaia asked, keeping her voice level. Elodie's expression shuttered immediately. "No, Papa loves me. He keeps me safe." The words were rote, rehearsed. The kind of thing a child says when she's been taught what answer is acceptable. But her hands kept twisting that thread, pulling it tighter and tighter until the fabric puckered. Safe from what? Everything. Elodie's gaze drifted to the window, where rain had started to patter against the glass. "The world is dangerous. Papa says people would hurt me if they knew about me, so I stay here where it's safe." Kaia's throat constricted. She'd seen cases like this in her nursing clinicals, read about them in her abnormal psychology textbook. Isolation presented as protection, control disguised as love. But looking at this child, at the careful way she held herself, at the desperate loneliness radiating from her like cold from ice. "Why were you crying?" Kaia asked gently. Elodie's composure cracked. Her face crumpled and fresh tears spilled over. The storm's coming. I can feel it. And Papa's not here. He's never here when the storms come, and I hate the dark. I hate it, but the power always goes out, and I'm all alone. The lights flickered. Both of them looked up at the chandelier overhead, a delicate thing of crystal and gold that suddenly seemed ominous. The bulbs dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows with increasing urgency. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Elodie made a sound like a wounded animal and scrambled further into her corner, pressing herself against the wall as if she could disappear into it. Her breathing came fast and shallow, edging toward hyperventilation. Kaia moved without thinking, crossing the room in 3 strides. She dropped to her knees beside the bed, close but not touching. "Hey, look at me. Elodie, look at me." The girl's eyes found hers, wild with panic. "You're not alone," Kaia said firmly. "I'm right here. I'm not leaving. You have to." Elodie's voice broke. "Papa will be so angry. He'll—" She cut herself off, but the fear in her eyes completed the sentence. The lights flickered again, longer this time. In the dimness, Kaia saw something that made her blood run cold. Shadows that moved wrong, that seemed to reach across the walls with fingers too long, too many. And for just a second, she could have sworn she saw eyes in those shadows, watching. Then the light stabilized, and there was nothing. Just a little girl's bedroom, pastel and perfect and utterly wrong. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the windows. Elodie screamed. The sound was pure terror, the kind that bypassed thought and went straight to instinct. She curled into a ball, hands over her ears, whole body shaking. The lights strobed once, twice, and went out completely. Darkness swallowed them. Not the soft darkness of a room at night, but absolute blackness, thick and suffocating. Kaia couldn't see her hand in front of her face. The only sound was Elodie's ragged breathing and the storm hammering against the house like it was trying to get in. Kaia reached out carefully, her hand finding small, trembling shoulders. "I've got you. You're okay." "No, no, no." The girl was spiraling, her breath coming in gasps. "They come in the dark. They always come when it's dark." "What comes?" But Elodie couldn't answer, couldn't do anything but shake and cry and make those awful wounded sounds. Kaia pulled her close, wrapping her arms around the small body, feeling the bird-quick heartbeat against her chest. The girl was so light, so fragile, like she might break if held too tight. "Listen to me," Kaia said, pitching her voice low and steady, the way she'd been taught in her pediatric rotation. "We're going to make a fort. You know how to make a pillow fort. A tiny hitching breath." "A what?" "A fort. A safe place. We'll use pillows and blankets, and nothing can get in. Not the dark, not the storm, nothing. It'll be our secret hideout. Just you and me." She felt Elodie's head move against her shoulder. Maybe a nod, maybe just a tremor. Kaia's eyes were adjusting to the darkness now, finding the faint grey outline of the window where lightning occasionally flashed. She could make out shapes: the bed, the shelves, the pile of decorative pillows stacked in the corner. Her phone was in her pocket. She pulled it out, and the screen's glow was like a beacon. Elodie flinched from the light, then stared at it like it was magic. "Okay," Kaia said, keeping one arm around the girl while she activated the flashlight function. "First we need supplies. Can you help me gather pillows?" For a long moment Elodie didn't move. Then slowly she uncurled. Her hand found Kaia's small fingers gripping tight. "Will you stay with me? Inside the fort?" The whole time, Kaia promised. They worked together in the phone's pale light, pulling pillows from the bed, dragging the gauzy canopy down to drape over chairs pulled from the small desk. Elodie moved mechanically at first, then with increasing engagement, her breathing steadying as she focused on the task. She knew where extra blankets were stored, in a chest at the foot of the bed, and she pulled out quilts that smelled of lavender and cedar. The fort took shape between the bed and the wall, a cave of softness in the dark room. Kaia wedged the phone into a gap between pillows, angling it so the light diffused through the fabric, creating a warm glow inside their shelter. They crawled in together, and Elodie immediately pressed against Kaia's side, her head finding the hollow of Kaia's shoulder. "See?" Kaia murmured. "Nothing can get us here." Elodie was quiet for a moment, then "Tell me a story." "What kind of story?" "A happy one, where nobody's alone." Kaia's throat tightened. She wrapped her arms around this child she'd just met, this little girl who'd been crying in the dark with no one to comfort her, and started to speak. She told her about the hospital where she did her clinicals, about the nurses who worked together like a family, about the patients who got better and went home. She made up details, embellished moments, painted a picture of a world where people took care of each other. Elodie listened, her breathing slowing, her body gradually relaxing. Outside, the storm raged. Thunder shook the house. Rain lashed the windows with a fury that sounded almost alive. But inside their fort, wrapped in blankets and softness, they were safe. "Kaia." Elodie's voice was drowsy now, the exhaustion of fear finally catching up. "Yeah. Thank you for not leaving me." Something in Kaia's chest cracked open. She pressed her cheek against the top of Elodie's head, feeling the silk of that pale hair, the warmth of a child who'd been cold for too long. "I won't leave you," she whispered. "Not tonight." Elodie's breathing deepened, evening out into the rhythm of sleep. Kaia held her, listening to the storm, feeling the weight of this small body trusting her completely. She thought about the rules she'd broken, the door she'd been warned never to open, the man whose footsteps had followed her down that hallway. She thought about the consequences waiting for her on the other side of this night, and she found she didn't care. Time became strange in the darkness. Kaia's phone battery was draining, the light growing dimmer. She should have been terrified, should have been planning her exit, her explanation, her defense. Instead, she felt oddly calm, purposeful. For the first time since taking this job, since starting nursing school, since her mother's diagnosis and the crushing weight of medical bills, for the first time in so long, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Elodie stirred in her sleep, making a small sound. Kaia adjusted her hold, tucking the blanket more securely around them both. That's when she felt it. The change in air pressure, the sense of presence. The door to the bedroom opened. She couldn't see it from inside the fort, but she heard it. The whisper of wood against carpet, the subtle shift in the room's acoustics. And then footsteps, so quiet they were almost imperceptible, crossing the floor toward them. Kaia's heart kicked against her ribs. She tightened her arms around Elodie, who slept on, oblivious. The phone's light was dying, casting everything in deep shadow. She could see the outline of their fort, the drape of fabric, but nothing beyond. The footsteps stopped just outside their shelter. Silence stretched, taut as a wire. Kaia could hear her own pulse, could feel Elodie's steady breathing, could sense someone standing there, mere inches away, separated only by a thin layer of gauze and cotton. Then a hand appeared, pulling back the fabric. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in stark white light. And in that brief frozen moment, Kaia saw him. Varic St stood at the entrance to their fort, and he was nothing like the man from the photographs. Those images had shown someone polished, controlled, distant. This man was something else entirely. His dark hair was plastered to his skull, dripping water onto the carpet. His clothes, an expensive suit that probably cost more than Kaia's car, was soaked through, clinging to a frame that was leaner and more dangerous than she'd imagined. But it was his face that stopped her breath. Beautiful, inhumanly beautiful, with features too perfect to be real, skin too pale, eyes too bright, and his mouth. His lips were parted slightly, and in the lightning's glare she saw them, fangs white and sharp, catching the light like knives. He was staring at where Kaia held his daughter, at the way Elodie was curled against her, peaceful and safe. And the expression on his face was so complex, so raw, that Kaia couldn't name it. Rage, yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like grief. The darkness returned as the lightning faded, but Kaia could still feel his gaze, could sense the coiled tension in him, the predator deciding whether to strike. When he spoke, his voice was barely human, scraped raw with something between fury and anguish. "What have you done?" The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Kaia's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't move, couldn't move. Elodie's weight against her chest was real and warm and trusting, and that trust was a shield she wouldn't lower. "I gave her what she needed," Kaia said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "What you should have given her." The air shifted. One moment Varic was at the entrance to the blanket fort, the next he was inside, moving with a speed that defied physics. The space contracted around him, suddenly too small, too close. Water dripped from his hair onto the carpet, each drop landing with a sound like a heartbeat. "You dare!" His voice broke off, strangled. Up close, she could see the way his jaw worked, the tendons standing out in his neck. His eyes weren't quite human, too bright, reflecting light that wasn't there. "You come into my home, touch my child, and you think you have the right to judge me." Elodie stirred against Kaia's chest, a small sound of distress escaping her throat. Kaia's arms tightened instinctively, and she felt the child's fingers curl into her shirt. "I'm not judging you," Kaia said, forcing herself to meet those inhuman eyes. "I'm telling you what I see. A little girl who's been so cold for so long that she thinks it's normal. A child who flinches when thunder rolls because she's always alone when it does. She is safe." The words came out like gravel, like something grinding against stone. "Protected. Everything I do, every rule, every precaution, it's to keep her safe." "From what?" Kaia shifted slightly, adjusting Elodie's weight. The child was breathing deeper now, settling back into sleep despite the tension crackling through the air. "From the world? From connection? From being a child?" Lightning flashed again, and in that stark illumination she saw his face transform. Rage, yes, but underneath it, something else. Something that looked like the moment before a dam breaks. "You don't understand." His hands were fists at his sides, trembling. "You can't understand what it means to be responsible for something so fragile, so breakable. Every moment she exists is a moment she could be taken from me. Every person who gets close is a potential threat. Every night she spends alone in that bed is a night she learns that love means distance." Kaia's voice was soft now, but it cut through his words like a blade. "That safety means isolation. That the price of being cared for is being cold." The words landed like physical blows. She watched them hit, watched the way his body recoiled even as he stayed rooted in place. His mouth opened, closed. The fangs caught the dim light from the hallway. I lost her mother. The confession tore out of him, raw and bleeding. I held her as she died, felt her go cold in my arms, and I couldn't save her, couldn't stop it. And Elodie, she's all that's left, all that remains, and if something happened to her because I wasn't careful enough, wasn't vigilant enough. So you've built her a beautiful prison. Kaia's throat was tight, but she pushed through it and called it love. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. Then Varic moved, not toward her, toward the edge of the fort, where he could see out through the gap in the blankets. His shoulders were rigid, his spine straight, but something about the line of his body spoke of exhaustion, of a weight carried too long. "What would you have me do?" The question was barely a whisper. "Let her run wild, expose her to dangers you can't even imagine. There are things in this world that would... I would have you hold her." Kaia's voice broke on the words. "I would have you sit with her during storms instead of hiding in your office. I would have you let her feel warmth, real warmth, not just the sterile temperature of a perfectly climate-controlled room. I would have you be her father, not her warden." Varic's head turned, just slightly, enough that she could see his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his throat worked as he swallowed. "I don't know how." The admission came out broken, shattered. "I don't know how to be close without being dangerous, how to love without destroying, how to hold something precious without crushing it." Kaia looked down at Elodie, at the way the child's face was soft in sleep, at the small hand that had worked its way free to rest against Kaia's collarbone. The trust in that gesture was devastating. "You learn," she said quietly. "You try, and you fail, and you try again. You let yourself be uncomfortable. You let yourself be afraid, because the alternative..." She had to stop, had to breathe through the tightness in her chest. "The alternative is this. A child who doesn't know what it feels like to be held, who thinks cold is normal, who builds forts alone and wishes for warmth she's never been allowed to feel." The storm raged outside, wind howling against the glass walls. But inside the blanket fort, everything was still, waiting. Then Varic turned fully toward her, and the expression on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. It was surrender. It was grief. It was a man looking at the ruins of everything he'd tried to build, and seeing, finally, what it had cost. He moved slowly this time, deliberately, giving her time to react. But Kaia didn't pull away as he sank down onto the carpet beside her, as he folded that dangerous, inhuman frame into something smaller, less threatening. Up close, she could see the fine tremor in his hands, the way his breath came uneven. "Show me," he whispered, and the words were a plea, a prayer. "Please, show me how." Kaia's eyes burned. She shifted carefully, adjusting Elodie so the child was cradled between them. Varic's hands hovered, uncertain, afraid to touch. "Here." Kaia guided his hand to Elodie's back, pressed his palm flat against the small sleeping form. "Feel that. That's her breathing. That's her alive and safe and dreaming." His hand was cold against the child's warmth. Kaia watched his face as he registered the difference, as understanding dawned in those two bright eyes. "She's so warm," he breathed. I didn't realize, because you never let yourself close enough to feel it." Kaia's free hand found Elodie's small fingers, curled them gently. "She's not fragile, Varic. She's resilient. Children are, but they need warmth to grow. They need touch. They need to know that the people who love them aren't afraid to hold them." Thunder rolled overhead, and Elodie stirred, Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused with sleep. Then she saw her father, and Kaia felt the small body tense. "Papa." The word was uncertain, almost afraid. Varic's face crumpled. "I'm here, little star." His voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Elodie blinked, confusion clear in her expression. Then, tentatively, she reached out one small hand. It hovered in the air between them, uncertain. Varic took it, wrapped his cold fingers around her warm ones, and held on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. "You're cold, Papa," Elodie said softly. "I know." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made Kaia's throat close. "I've been cold for a very long time." Elodie looked at Kaia, then back at her father. Then, with the simple logic of a child, she took Kaia's hand with her free one and pressed it against Varic's. "Miss Kaia is warm," she said. "She can help." The three of them sat there in the blanket fort, hands joined, while the storm raged outside and the night pressed against the glass. Kaia felt the cold of Varic's skin, the warmth of Elodie's small palm, the way heat moved between them like a promise. "Thank you," Varic whispered, and she didn't know if he was speaking to her or to his daughter or to something larger. "Thank you for showing me what I couldn't see." The wind howled, the lightning flashed. But inside their small shelter of blankets and pillows, warmth was beginning to bloom. Slow and tentative, but real. So real. Kaia watched as Elodie's eyes drifted closed again, her head coming to rest against her father's chest. Watched as Varic's arms came up, finally to hold her. Watched as his eyes closed, and something like peace settled over his features. Outside, the storm would eventually pass. The night would give way to dawn. But for now, in this moment, three people who had been cold for too long sat together in the dark and learned what it meant to be warm.